grandfather was born in 1898 in what was then Syria, which is now Lebanon. And as a 13-year-old boy, he left Syria with his 17-year-old cousin in order to emigrate to the United States to avoid being taken really by force into fighting against the Turkish Empire at the time by the French Foreign Legion. So as he got to the United States, he quickly found out that he couldn't immigrate into here as a 13-year-old, so he had to say he was a 16-year-old. So he arrived in 1912. I always knew that because he arrived the same year the Titanic sank. And jokingly, we'd ask him, why didn't you take the Titanic? And he would say, if I did, none of you would be here. So as he came in here, obviously, and he did not speak any English, and neither did his cousin, they went around and they tried to figure out how to work. So they immigrated originally from New York down into Philadelphia, worked for a while in Philadelphia doing odd jobs, and eventually immigrated up into doing lumber work up in Canada for a short period of time, and then immigrated back into the United States. He eventually settled here around Dearborn and did multiple things, and inclusive of, in the early Prohibition time, being involved in bootlegging, because those were jobs that they were able to run from Detroit to Michigan City, Indiana, and move alcohol back and forth. Eventually, Ford Motor Company began to hire, and my grandfather went to work for Ford Motor Company and married and settled into a house on Salina Street in the South End, and raised 4 children, and then had probably 12 or 14 grandchildren. I'd have to count them all up, and how many great-grandchildren, it just continues to expound. The difficulty for anyone at that time immigrating is there wasn't a network of services, there wasn't an immigration group. What you had to do was try to find a network of people that could help you to navigate the system, and you had to work. There wasn't a government network to support you. You had to work. So all of them worked, and they worked odd jobs, and they did whatever they had to do to survive until he actually found his full-time job at Ford Motor Company, where he eventually retired from, and he always was very proud of being able to work at Ford and make a living for his family so they could do better for themselves. And I think his strong work ethic created the same strong work ethic for my father and for my family as well. I think that work ethic of the immigrant is so important to this country, because immigration has been the key to our stability and to the strength. And it still is the key to our stability and our strength. And I don't want to be political, but I'm a big believer in immigration policy, and I'm a huge believer in bringing people into this country that want to work and make us a better place. That's why he came. He actually came because his father was killed in the war, and both his brothers were killed in the war, and his mother made the decision that she didn't want to lose every male in the family, and so she sent him with her cousin Najib. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to get on a boat as a 13-year-old and come to a land where you knew no one, and only knowing that the opportunities here were greater than they were at home. And so many other immigrants had done the same thing and come through Ellis Island, and been part of our great country's heritage from that point on. And we are mostly a country of immigrants. I'm proud to be able to speak about him here today, because it was a difficult pathway. And his language, even as he never had a great command of the English language his entire life, because even though he did take some classes, there weren't a lot. And at the time, even as he was becoming an adult, in this area there was one mosque, and it was on Joy Road. So being able to practice his faith, and he was a Muslim, there was only one place to go. Today it's much more eclectic, and we have a greater chance to practice our faith in multiple locations, and that's a benefit to all of us, to be able to do what we want to do and have the freedoms that we have here. So I'm proud to be a third generation, and I am, he was the first generation of Bazzies to come into here. My father was the second, and I am the third generation, and there'll be multiple more generations more going forward.